My son robbed me and ran away, but it was my 13-year-old grandson who sent him to jail. With an old laptop, the boy exposed his own father and dismantled a gang that was scamming elderly people. The police only acted after the boy did the work alone. In the end, the one who taught a lesson about justice was someone who hadn't even finished school yet. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun was rising on the horizon when Teresa woke up that Thursday morning. As usual, her slow steps guided her to the kitchen to prepare breakfast before Michael, her 16-year-old grandson, woke up for school. For the past 10 years since losing her daughter-in-law in an accident, Teresa had taken on raising the boy. Her son Robert remained in the house, but his presence was like a shadow that came and went as convenient. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small house in the Chicago suburbs when Michael appeared at the kitchen door, with messy hair and already wearing his technical school uniform. "Good morning, Grandma," he said, placing a gentle kiss on the wrinkled forehead of the elderly woman. "Already preparing coffee at this hour? For someone who wakes up with the chickens like me, this is almost lunchtime," Teresa responded with a smile, placing fresh bread and a pitcher of orange juice on the table. Michael smiled back. At 16, he was a computer prodigy. While other teenagers lost themselves in online games, he created small applications and fixed computers to supplement the family income. Teresa's retirement money, combined with the small amount that Robert occasionally contributed, barely covered basic expenses. "Where's my dad?" asked Michael, biting into a piece of bread. Teresa sighed, avoiding her grandson's gaze. "He went out last night and hasn't returned yet. He said he was with that Patricia, the financial consultant he met last month." Michael frowned. Since Patricia had entered his father's life, something had changed. Robert, who had always been unstable, now seemed to live in a constant state of euphoria, talking about investments, opportunities, and a new life awaiting them. "Grandma, don't you find this whole story strange? Dad never showed interest in finance, and now he's constantly talking about investments." Teresa adjusted the tablecloth, trying to disguise her own concern. "Your father has always been like this, Michael. He gets excited about new things, then drops them. Let's give it time." What Teresa didn't tell her grandson that morning was about Patricia's visit to the house 2 days earlier, when Michael was at school. The woman, with her impeccable suits and sophisticated vocabulary, had convinced Teresa to sign some documents related to a safe investment that would multiply her savings. The money from the sale of the house she had shared with her late husband, his life insurance, and the fund she was saving for Michael's college, everything would be maximized, according to the consultant. "Mrs. Teresa, you've worked your whole life. You deserve a peaceful retirement," Patricia had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "With this return, you'll even be able to realize your dream of seeing Michael studying abroad." The dream of seeing her grandson graduate from a renowned university was Teresa's only weakness, and Patricia seemed to know this. With Robert emphatically supporting the plan, the elderly woman signed the papers, delivering the fruit of decades of work into the hands of that stranger. After breakfast, Michael said goodbye to his grandmother and left for school. Teresa, alone in the silent house, walked through the rooms with a disturbing presentiment. Something wasn't right. The silence of her son, absent for almost 24 hours, weighed in the air like a storm warning. The phone rang, startling her. It was Marilyn, her longtime friend and neighbor. "Teresa, did you see the newspaper today? They're talking about a scam targeting retirees in our neighborhood, some fake financial consultancy that's been deceiving elderly people." Teresa's heart accelerated. She quickly hung up the phone and ran to the drawer where she kept the documents Patricia had given her. She reread each line, each clause, and reality began to take shape in her mind with painful clarity. When the living room door abruptly opened, Teresa almost screamed in fright. It was Robert, but not the son she knew. His eyes were different, cold, calculating. Behind him, Patricia entered, no longer displaying the cordial smile of previous days. "Mom, I came to say goodbye," announced Robert, dropping a suitcase on the floor. "I'm going to Miami with Patricia. We secured a big investment there." Teresa felt the blood freeze in her veins. "Goodbye? What do you mean goodbye? What about Michael? What about our house?" "Michael is already grown up. He can manage. As for the house, well..." Robert exchanged a complicit look with Patricia. "The documents you signed, Mom, were more complex than they seem. Technically, you transferred your savings to an investment fund that, let's say, it no longer exists." The ground seemed to disappear beneath Teresa's feet. She clung to the table to keep from falling, while her son's words hit her like stabs. You robbed me. Robbed your own son, his college money." "Don't be dramatic, Mom. Call it a permanent loan." Robert laughed dryly, picking up the suitcase again. "You've always managed well. You'll find a way." When the door slammed behind her son and Patricia, Teresa collapsed on the sofa, silent. Tears streaming down her wrinkled face. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal, the breach of trust, the abandonment. How would she explain it to Michael? How would they support the house now? The clock was approaching noon when she heard hurried footsteps. Michael came running in, his face pale with worry. "Grandma, Aunt Marilyn called me at school. She said Dad was leaving with a suitcase that you guys fought." Seeing his grandmother's state, Michael sat beside her, holding her trembling hands. Teresa tried to hide it, but her grandson was no longer a child. With a choked voice, she told him everything: the documents, the false promises, the disappearance of their savings. Instead of the explosion of anger Teresa expected, Michael remained strangely calm. His eyes, so similar to his grandfather's, acquired a determined gleam that she knew well. "Grandma, do you trust me?" Teresa nodded, surprised by the maturity in her grandson's gaze. "Then give me a few days. Let's not go to the authorities yet. I have a plan." That night, while Teresa tried to process the magnitude of the betrayal suffered, Michael locked himself in his room with his computer. On the screen, windows opened and closed rapidly as his fingers danced across the keyboard. The computer his father had left behind held more secrets than Robert could imagine, and Michael was determined to discover every one of them. "If he used technology to betray us," he muttered to himself, "I'll use technology to save us." In the week following Robert's departure, Teresa's house seemed to have lost its soul. The elderly woman tried to keep up appearances, making an effort to smile during breakfast and asking about Michael's classes, but her red eyes betrayed sleepless nights. The shame of having been deceived by her own son, mixed with worry about the future. Without their savings, how would they pay the bills? How would Michael study in college? "Grandma, you need to eat," insisted Michael that morning, pushing the bowl of oatmeal toward his grandmother. "Not eating won't solve anything." Teresa sighed, stirring the spoon in the oatmeal without appetite. "I have no appetite, my child. I can only think about how foolish I was." Michael firmly held his grandmother's wrinkled hand. "You weren't foolish. You were betrayed by someone who should have protected you. The difference is enormous." Since his father's departure, Michael spent almost all his free hours locked in his room, alternating between Robert's computer and his own laptop. When Teresa asked what he was doing so much, he vaguely responded about a school project or internet research, but the truth was much more complex. That afternoon, while Teresa was resting, Michael made an alarming discovery. Accessing emails, forgotten on his father's computer, he found dozens of messages exchanged with Patricia over the last 8 months, long before introducing her to the family. The emails revealed a meticulous plan: identify elderly people with substantial savings, gain their trust through children or close relatives, and convince them to invest in phantom funds. "My God," murmured Michael, feeling his stomach turn. As he read a message where Robert boasted about how it would be easy to convince the old lady, referring to his own mother. They planned everything. Deepening his investigation, Michael discovered encrypted files containing lists of names, addresses, and values. 17 other victims, all elderly, all with profiles similar to Teresa's. Retirees who had saved all, their lives widows or widowers emotionally vulnerable, all with children or relatives who served as bridges for the scammers. We're not the only ones, he said to himself, printing the documents and organizing them methodically. The room, once typical of a teenager, now looked like an investigator's office. Papers on walls, colored post-its connecting information, and at the center of it all, a digital map tracking the flow of money between various accounts. On a rainy afternoon, Teresa entered the room without warning, carrying a tray with sandwiches and juice. Her eyes widened at seeing the transformation of the environment. "Michael, what is all this?" The boy, startled, tried to cover the notes, but it was too late. Teresa left the tray on the desk and approached the walls covered with paper. She read some names, recognizing them. Mr. Anthony from the 3rd floor, Mrs. Claire from the Retirement Association, Mr. James from the corner bakery. All elderly, all from the same neighborhood. "You're investigating your father?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael hesitated but decided he could no longer hide. He sat his grandmother on the edge of the bed and explained everything. The discovered messages, the network of scams, the elaborate scheme that victimized elderly people throughout the city. As he spoke, Teresa's eyes filled with tears. No longer of sadness, but a mixture of pride and fear for her grandson. "Michael, this is too dangerous," she warned, holding the young man's hands. "Your father and this Patricia, they're not just scammers. Given the size of this scheme, there must be powerful people involved." "I know, Grandma. That's why I'm being careful. I use VPNs, anonymous servers, fake online identities. I never know it's me." Teresa shook her head, displeased. "And what do you plan to do with all this? Go to the police?" Michael stood up, walking to the computer. On the screen, lines of code indecipherable to Teresa blinked at a frantic rhythm. The police would take months to act, if they acted at all. Many of these elderly people don't even know they've been robbed yet. Others are ashamed to admit they fell for a scam. "No, Grandma. I'm doing something better." In the following days, Michael established a routine. In the morning, he went to school. In the afternoon, he worked odd jobs fixing computers around the neighborhood, now more necessary than ever, given the precarious financial situation. At night, he transformed into a digital vigilante. He created fake profiles to infiltrate forums used by the scammers. He tracked bank accounts, identified transfer patterns, mapped the organization's hierarchy. He discovered, with growing alarm, that the scheme was not limited to his father and Patricia. There was a larger structure, with tentacles in banks, notary offices, and even public agencies. "Look at this, Grandma," he showed Teresa one night, pointing to the screen. "These names here, Judge Paul Mitchell and Ms. Lois Campbell. He's a retired judge. She was a director of a major bank. They're the ones providing legal protection for the scheme to work." Teresa adjusted her glasses, watching attentively. "How did you get all this information, my child?" Michael smiled, but his eyes revealed tiredness. The deep, dark circles betrayed sleepless nights. "Let's just say your grandson understands a bit about computers, Grandma." What Michael didn't tell his grandmother was about the nightmares he had begun to have. Dreams where his father pursued him, where mysterious men invaded the house, where Teresa suffered because of him. He would wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night, wondering if he was doing the right thing. On a Tuesday, Michael skipped class. He had arranged an anonymous meeting with a journalist from an independent news portal. He wouldn't reveal his identity, only deliver documentary evidence about the scheme. It was his first step to publicly expose the scam. "I have evidence of a scheme that has harmed at least 17 elderly people in Chicago," he explained on the phone, using a voice modulator. "I can provide names, dates, values, and methods." Vitame, journalist Deborah Martin, agreed to meet him in a public park. Michael arrived half an hour early, wearing a cap and dark glasses, carrying a folder with carefully selected documents, enough to initiate an investigation without revealing that he was the son of one of the scammers. "How did you get this information?" asked Deborah, leafing through the papers with growing interest. "I have my methods," replied Michael, keeping his face partially covered. "The important thing is that these people are exposed and the victims compensated." As he walked away from the park, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had taken the first step, There was no turning back. Back at his computer, Michael intensified his efforts. He developed an algorithm that identified patterns in the scammer's bank transactions and began silently to reverse small amounts to the victim's original accounts. They weren't large values, that would be too risky, but enough to create confusion among the criminals. "They're getting paranoid," he commented to Teresa, showing desperate messages exchanged between Robert and Patricia. "They think someone inside the scheme is betraying the group." Teresa observed her grandson with a mixture of admiration and concern. Michael, always so introverted and focused on his studies, now revealed a determination she never imagined existed. "I am afraid of what your father might do if he discovers it's you," she confessed. Michael hugged his grandmother, trying to convey a confidence that he himself didn't completely feel. He'll never find out. And even if he suspected, he would never believe that a kid like me could dismantle something so sophisticated. That night, while Teresa slept, Michael received an anonymous message on the system he had created for communication with the victims. It was short, but made his blood freeze. "We know who you are. Stop now or your grandmother will pay the price." Michael stared at the message on the screen for long minutes, feeling his heart race in his chest. "We know who you are. Stop now, or your grandmother will pay the price." The words pulsated in his mind like a red alert. His first reaction was to run to Teresa's room to check if she was okay. He found her sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the threat hanging over them. Returning to his room, Michael analyzed all his recent steps. Where had he made the mistake? How had they managed to track him? He reviewed his codes, his connections, his contacts. The only possibility was that someone had noticed his meeting with journalist Deborah. Perhaps they were following the reporter. Not him. He decided not to tell his grandmother about the threat. Teresa already carried too many burdens on her fragile shoulders. Instead, Michael intensified security measures in the house. He discreetly installed cameras connected to his cell phone, programmed motion sensors on the doors, and reinforced all his online anonymity protocols. "They want to scare me," he muttered to himself as he worked feverishly on the computer. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." The next morning, Deborah's first article was published on the news portal. "Criminal scheme targets retirees in Chicago." The report, still cautious, mentioned anonymous sources and presented partial evidence of the scam. It was just the beginning, but enough to create agitation in the involved circles. Michael monitored the reactions through the communication channels of the scammers he had managed to infiltrate. As expected, panic set in. Desperate messages were exchanged between the gang members, mutual accusations arose, distrust grew. Exactly what he wanted. Taking advantage of the confusion, Michael implemented the second phase of his plan. He created a simple application with a friendly interface called ElderGuard. The app allowed older people to verify the legitimacy of financial proposals, check the reputation of consultants, and receive alerts about common scams. On the technical side, the program also silently analyzed the user's bank transactions, identifying suspicious patterns. "Grandma, I want you to test this for me," he asked, installing the application on Teresa's phone. "It's a school project to help elderly people protect themselves from scams." Teresa looked suspiciously at the device. "I've never understood these modern things, Michael. I don't know if I'll be able to use this." "It's very simple, Grandma. Look, you just need to press this button here when someone offers some kind of business or investment. The app will check if it's trustworthy." What Michael didn't fully explain was that the application also served as a protection network. If installed on the phones of other potential victims, it would allow identifying new scammers before they could apply their schemes. In a few days, with the help of retirement associations and the neighborhood community center, ElderGuard was already on the phones of dozens of elderly people. Meanwhile, Deborah's report was gaining repercussion. Other media outlets began to investigate the case, and some victims, encouraged by the public exposure, approached the authorities. The police opened a preliminary inquiry, still without specific suspects. In his room headquarters, Michael observed the developments with cautious satisfaction. His nights continued to be filled with nightmares, now more intense. He dreamed of his father being taken by police, saw Teresa's disappointed face, heard voices accusing him of betraying his own family. "I'm doing the right thing," he repeated, to himself upon waking up sweating in the middle of the night. "I'm not betraying anyone. They betrayed us first." On a Saturday afternoon, while organizing his evidence, Michael received an unexpected call. The number was unknown, but something made him answer. "Son, it's me." Robert's voice, once so familiar, now sounded like a stranger's. Michael felt. His body stiffened but kept his voice controlled. "What do you want?" "We need to talk. Things got out of control. I'm coming back to Chicago tomorrow. Can we meet?" Michael hesitated. Was it a trap? An attempt to find out how much he knew, or was his father really? "Sorry? Why would you come back now? Did the money run out too quickly?" There was silence on the other end of the line. When Robert spoke again, his voice seemed choked. "Michael, I made a terrible mistake. I was manipulated by Patricia, I believed, in her promises. But now everything is falling apart. There are reports, investigations, and they're suspecting me." "And they should," Michael replied coldly. "You robbed your own mother." I know, and I deeply regret it. I want to fix things. I still have part of the money. I can return it. Please meet me tomorrow at the cafe near the station. Just you, don't tell your grandmother yet." After hanging up, Michael remained motionless, contemplating his options. He could be honest and tell his grandmother about the call, risk meeting with his father, or completely ignore the contact. The last option seemed safest, but something inside him, perhaps the last remnant of filial love, impelled him to give a chance. He decided on a middle ground. He would go to the meeting, but not alone. He contacted Deborah, explaining the situation without revealing that Robert was his father. The journalist agreed to be at the location discreetly, accompanied by a photographer. If it was a trap, at least there would be witnesses. On Sunday, Michael arrived at the cafe half an hour before the agreed time. He chose a table in the back, with a clear view of the entrance and close to an emergency exit. Deborah and her colleague positioned themselves at separate tables, pretending not to know each other. At 3 p.m. sharp, Robert entered the establishment. He looked worn out, very different from the confident man who had left weeks before. His eyes scanned the environment until finding his son. "Michael," he greeted, sitting across from the boy. "Thank you for coming." "Get to the point, Michael." "Cut in. What do you want?" Robert sighed, running his hands over his tired face. "Things went wrong. Patricia, she wasn't who I thought. The scheme was bigger, more dangerous. There were powerful people involved, people I didn't even know." "And you only realize this now, after robbing 17 elderly people, including your own mother?" Robert's eyes widened. "How do you know the exact number of victims?" Michael realized his mistake, but maintained his composure. "It's in the newspapers. Everyone knows." Robert seemed to accept the explanation, though his gaze betrayed suspicion. "Anyway, I want to do the right thing. I have about 200,000 saved in an account Patricia doesn't know about. I can transfer it to Grandma tomorrow." "And the rest?" "It was almost 700,000 in total." Again, Robert seemed surprised by the precision of his son's information. His eyes narrowed slightly. "The rest?" "Patricia took it. She disappeared 3 days ago, taking almost everything. But I can testify against her, against everyone. I know names, accounts, methods." Michael studied his father carefully. Was there sincerity in his words, or was it just another manipulation? "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm your father," Robert replied, extending his hand across the table, "and because, despite everything, I love you and your grandmother." At that moment, Michael's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Deborah. "There are 4 suspicious men outside. They just arrived. Leave through the back." Michael felt his blood freeze. It was a trap, after all. Robert was probably distracting him while other members of the gang prepared to act. "We need to go," said Michael, rising abruptly. "Now." Robert looked confused. "What? Why? We're still talking." "I know what you're doing," Michael replied, already heading for the back exit. "And it won't work." Robert tried to follow him, but at that exact moment, Deborah's photographer positioned himself in his path, momentarily blocking him. It was enough for Michael to escape. Running through the neighborhood streets, Michael felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. Part of him still wanted to believe in his father, in the possibility of redemption. But the evidence was clear. Robert remained involved with the scammers, continued to be a threat. Upon arriving home, breathless, he found Teresa watching television. The elderly woman stood up, alarmed at seeing her grandson's state. "Michael, what happened?" "Grandma, my father came back. He tried to meet me, but I think it was a trap." Teresa's eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolution. "We need to call the police, Michael. Enough of trying to solve this by ourselves." Michael nodded. It was time to take the next step. He took his laptop and showed his grandmother a file he had meticulously prepared over weeks. A complete dossier on the scheme with names, dates, values, methods, and concrete evidence, all organized in a way that didn't reveal his direct participation in the investigation. "Tomorrow morning we'll go to the police station," he decided. "It's time to end this once and for all." That night, while preparing the final details for the next day, Michael received a new message on the system. This time it wasn't a threat, but a desperate plea from his father. "Son, they discovered I talked to you. They're coming after me. Help me, please. You're smarter than all of them combined. I don't know how, but you figured everything out, didn't you? You're my only hope now." Michael stared at the computer screen for long minutes, rereading his father's desperate message. His feelings were a confused whirlwind. Anger at the betrayal suffered, fear for what might happen, and surprisingly, a pang of concern for Robert. Despite everything, he was still his father. "Grandma," he called, entering the kitchen where Teresa was preparing tea to calm her nerves. "I need to tell you something." Carefully, he showed the message to his grandmother. Teresa adjusted her glasses, reading the words with an impassive expression. When she finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. "What do you intend to do, Michael?" "I don't know," admitted the young man, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Part of me wants to ignore him completely. He betrayed us, stole our savings, destroyed our trust, but another part still sees him as your father," Teresa completed with a soft voice. "And that's normal, my child. Love doesn't disappear overnight, even when we're deeply hurt." Michael nodded, grateful for his grandmother's understanding. "I think I need to respond. Not to save him, but to understand everything, to make sure we'll recover what's ours." He sent a short message. "Where are you? What really happened to the money?" The response came almost instantaneously, as if Robert was clinging to his cell phone, desperately waiting. "I'm at a hotel near the bus terminal. Patricia disappeared with almost everything, but it wasn't just her. There are bigger people behind this, Michael. Dangerous people. I discovered that everything was part of a much bigger scheme than I imagined. Please help me. I'm afraid of what they might do to me, and to you." Michael showed the response to his grandmother, who frowned. "It could be another trap," she warned. "Yes, but it could also be our chance to recover the money and end the scheme once and for all," argued Michael. "I'll contact Deborah again. If she can bring the police along, we can set up an operation to catch everyone at once." The journalist answered on the first ring, still agitated by the events at the cafe. "Michael, those men were dangerous. They followed my photographer for almost 10 blocks before giving up. We have to be very careful. My father contacted me again. He says he's being pursued by the gang itself. I want to arrange a meeting, but with the police present this time." There was a pause on the line. "That's risky, but maybe it's our best chance. I have a contact in the police who's following the case. I can talk to him, see if we can set up an operation." In the following hours, Michael, Deborah, and Detective Matthew Carter, a specialist in financial crimes, elaborated a detailed plan. Robert would be instructed to arrange a meeting with the other members of the gang, claiming he had information about a hacker who was sabotaging the operations. The police would be strategically positioned around the location. "Did your father agree to this?" asked the detective, visibly skeptical. "I haven't talked to him about the details yet. "But he seems desperate enough to cooperate," replied Michael, trying to sound more confident than he actually felt. The message sent to Robert was carefully crafted. "I can help, but I need you to do something first. Arrange a meeting with the others involved. Say you've discovered who's sabotaging the operations and that you can deliver this person. When everyone is gathered, I'll send the police." 3. Response took longer this time. When it finally came, it was short and direct. "Understood, I'll try, give me a few hours." That night was the longest in Michael and Teresa's lives. Sitting in the small living room with cups of coffee growing cold in their hands, they anxiously awaited any news. Detective Carter called every hour to update them. His teams were positioned, ready to act as soon as Robert confirmed the location and time of the meeting. At 11:47 p.m., Michael's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Robert. "Riverside Hotel, conference room in the basement. Tomorrow 10 a.m. They'll all be there, including Judge Mitchell and former Director Campbell. I convinced them by saying I know who the hacker is. They're desperate." Michael immediately forwarded the message to the detective and to Deborah. The plan was in motion. "Grandma, I think it's better if you stay home tomorrow," suggested Michael, concerned. Teresa adjusted herself on the sofa, straightening her posture with a determination that surprised her grandson. "No way. My son robbed me, betrayed my trust, and now is involved with criminals. I need to look him in the eyes. I need to be there when it all ends." The next morning, the Riverside Hotel seemed normal to any casual observer. Guests came and went, staff circulated discreetly, the routine remained unchanged, but trained eyes would notice the men and women strategically positioned in the lobby and the restaurant near the elevators. Plainclothes police officers ready to act. Michael and Teresa, following the detective's instructions, remained in a car parked across the street, along with Deborah. From there, they could follow the operation through a radio, in safety. "They're all arriving," informed Carter's voice through the radio. "We've identified Judge Mitchell, former Director Campbell, and 4 more suspects, including your father, Michael. They're heading to the conference room." Michael's heart accelerated. It was real. It was happening. Years of scams, of exploitation, against vulnerable elderly people, about to end. "Teams in position," continued the detective. "Wait for my signal to invade." The following minutes seemed to drag on. In the car, Michael firmly held his grandmother's hand, both in silence, trapped in their own thoughts. What was Robert feeling at that moment? Fear, remorse, or just calculating his next betrayal? Suddenly, the detective's voice returned, agitated. "Unexpected movement. 2 armed men just entered the room. It seems to be an internal dispute. We're acting now. All teams advance." Michael and Teresa exchanged alarmed looks. Guns, this wasn't in the plan. What was happening? Chaos quickly ensued. Through the radio, they heard orders being shouted, doors being broken down, the confusion of a police operation in progress. Deborah, unable to contain her journalistic curiosity, left the car to try to get a better view, promising to return soon. After what seemed like an eternity, but were only 20 minutes, the radio came back to life. Situation under control. 6 detained, including the main suspects. No serious injuries. You can approach now, but keep distance from the main entrance. Use the side one. Entering the hotel through the service door, Michael and Teresa were greeted by Detective Carter, who led them through secondary corridors to a small waiting room, away from curious eyes and cameras that were already beginning to arrive. "What happened in there?" asked Michael, anxious. "Apparently there was a split in the group. Some suspected your father was cooperating with authorities and intended to silence him. Fortunately, we intervened in time." The detective hesitated before continuing. "Your father, he really was cooperating. He delivered important documents, confessed his participation, and implicated the others. This will help a lot in the process." "Can I see him?" asked Teresa, her voice trembling. The detective nodded. "Briefly. He'll be taken to give a formal statement, but I got authorization for a quick meeting before that." They were led to a small room where Robert waited, sitting at the table with his hands handcuffed in front. Upon seeing his mother and son, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom, Michael," he began, his voice choked. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable." Teresa approached slowly, observing her son as if seeing a stranger. In a sense, that's exactly what he was. The man before her was no longer the boy she had raised with so much love, the son for whom she had sacrificed so many dreams. "Why, Robert?" she asked simply. "Why do this to us? To your own family?" Robert lowered his eyes, unable to sustain his mother's gaze. "It started with small debts, gambling, loans. When I met Patricia, I was already sunk. She offered a way out, an easy way to make money. She said no one would get hurt, that they were just alternative investments. One lie led to another, and when I realized, I was too involved to get out." "And the part of the money you said you had saved?" questioned Michael, keeping his distance. "It's true. I have about 200,000 in a separate account. I've already passed the details to the detective. All the money will be returned to the victims, proportionally to what they lost." Teresa took a deep breath, the wrinkles on her face seeming deeper under the cold light of the room. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, Robert. Not for the money, but for the broken trust. You betrayed not only me, but your own son." "I know," he replied, with an almost inaudible voice. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to redeem myself, even knowing it may never be enough." Michael, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "How did they find out about me? How did they know I was investigating you?" A slight smile, sad and proud at the same time, appeared on Robert's face. "They never completely found out. They suspected there was someone sabotaging the operations, but they didn't know who. I began to suspect when you mentioned the exact number of victims at the cafe. Only someone with access to our records would know that with such precision." The detective entered the room, indicating that time was up. Before being taken away, Robert looked one last time at his son. "You're brilliant, Michael. Much more than I ever was or will be. Use that talent for good. Don't make the same mistakes I did." In the months that followed, Michael and Teresa's life underwent profound transformations. With the scheme dismantled and the main people involved imprisoned or facing charges, the victims began to receive back part of the diverted money. It wasn't the total amount, but offered some relief. The ElderGuard application, perfected by Michael, gained national recognition. A digital security company offered a partnership to develop it commercially, with part of the profits going to a protection fund for elderly victims of financial scams. Deborah published a series of reports about the case, winning an investigative journalism award. She always respected Michael's anonymity, referring to him only as a specialized technical source. Robert was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with possibility of progression to a semi-open regime after 3 years, considering his collaboration with authorities. The others involved received more severe penalties, especially Judge Mitchell and former Director Campbell, who abused their positions of trust. On a Sunday afternoon, almost a year after the events at the Riverside Hotel, Michael received a letter. The sender was the state penitentiary where his father was serving his sentence. He hesitated before opening it, uncertain if he was ready for anything Robert might say. "You can read it if you want," said Teresa, observing her grandson from the bedroom door. "It's part of the healing process." Michael nodded carefully, opening the envelope. The letter was short, written in handwriting he barely recognized. "Dear Michael, I hope this letter finds you well. I don't seek forgiveness, as I know some actions are unforgivable. I only seek for you to know that despite everything, I'm proud of the man you've become. Strong, honest, determined to do what's right even when it's difficult. Your application. There's saving people. The social worker here at the penitentiary showed me a report about it. ElderGuard, a perfect name. You protect those who many consider vulnerable, but who carry within themselves the wisdom of a lifetime. When I get out of here, I don't know if I'll have a place in your life. That's something only time will tell. But know that whatever you do, my heart will be with you. With love, despite everything, your father. Michael slowly folded the letter, feeling a strange peace. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Perhaps it never would be. But it was an acknowledgement that, even in the darkest stories, there is room for light to find its way. That night, while helping his grandmother prepare dinner, Michael reflected on everything they had been through. The betrayal, the pain, the fight for justice, and finally the new beginning. Teresa, noticing his contemplative silence, placed a loving hand on his shoulder. "You know, Michael, when your grandfather was alive, he always said that a person's true wealth isn't in the bank, but in the lives they touch. You've touched many lives this year, my grandson. Saved not only me, but dozens of other elderly people. That's worth more than any bank account." Michael smiled, hugging his grandmother affectionately. "I learned from the best, Grandma. I learned from the best." Outside the small house, night fell gently over the neighborhood. In apartments around, elderly people checked their cell phones, opening the application with the golden umbrella icon, feeling a little safer in a world that frequently forgot them. And somewhere, behind the bars of a penitentiary, a man looked through the narrow window, seeking redemption in the stars he could barely see. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Michael and Teresa's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this narrative of overcoming and family love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and human